My phone screen was a rectangle of pale blue light in the dark of my bedroom. It was 1:47 a.m., and it was lighting up again. Leah, please. Just answer me. A moment passed. The three little dots appeared, dancing, then vanishing, then dancing again. He was typing, deleting, retyping. My stomach hollowed out. Leah, I know I messed up. I'm dying over here. It was the sixth text in the last hour. I watched the message bubble, my thumb hovering just above the block button. It had been hovering there for 2 weeks, ever since he and Maya broke up. The girl he told me was just a friend for the last 4 months of our relationship. My phone screen was a rectangle of pale blue light in the dark of my bedroom. It was 1:47 a.m., and it was lighting up again. Leah, please, just answer me. A moment passed. The three little dots appeared, dancing, then vanishing, then dancing again. He was typing, deleting, retyping. My stomach hollowed out. Leah, I know I messed up. I'm dying over here. It was the sixth text in the last hour. I watched the message bubble, my thumb hovering just above the block button. It had been hovering there for 2 weeks, ever since he and Maya broke up. The girl he told me was just a friend for the last 4 months of our relationship. The word begging felt wrong. It was too strong, too active. This wasn't begging. It was haunting, a digital ghost rattling its chains because its new house wasn't working out. I had left him on a Tuesday. I remembered because I had a history midterm the next day that I hadn't studied for, and the date was burned into my brain. I'd spent the entire weekend before that Tuesday crying in the school library, hiding in a study carrel on the 3rd floor. I'd tried to make myself small enough to disappear between the stacks of political science textbooks, breathing in the smell of old paper and floor wax. He was at the state soccer semifinals. He was supposed to be on the fan bus with the rest of his friends. I was supposed to meet him back on campus, my hands full of snacks for the victory party I was sure they'd have. But he hadn't taken the bus. He'd driven up with Maya and her friends instead. I saw the pictures. Everyone did. They were all over Instagram stories, a rolling 24-hour nightmare I couldn't look away from. I sat in that carrel, the dim fluorescent light humming above me, and just tapped. Tap. A video of them in the car, music screaming, Maya holding her phone and laughing as she turned the camera from her own face to Leah, who was driving and grinning. Tap. A blurry shot of them on the bleachers, his arm slung casually around her shoulders, her head tilted toward his. Tap. A group shot after the game. Him and Maya in the center, his face flushed with the win, her hand on his chest. My notifications, meanwhile, were silent. My own text to him, good luck today, thinking of you, had been sent at 8:15 a.m. The 2 little blue check marks confirmed it. Read. That was the moment. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was like a hairline crack in a mirror I'd been ignoring for months. I'd kept tilting the mirror, trying to find an angle where I couldn't see the fracture. But that picture, his arm around her, was the tap that finally split the glass. I wasn't just lonely. I was alone, while technically still having a boyfriend. He had emotionally abandoned me weeks before his arm ever found its way around someone else. He had replaced our late-night calls, the ones where we'd whisper about nothing until one of us fell asleep, with one-word answers. Busy, tired, later. He'd forgotten our plans to go to the City Film Festival, the one I'd bought the tickets for 2 months in advance. I ended up taking my little brother, who fell asleep during the main feature. He'd been present, physically, in the school hallways. I'd see him at his locker, and he'd give me that quick, distracted kiss on the cheek. But his eyes were always somewhere else, scanning the crowd, landing on her. He'd made me invisible, long before he made me the X, so I ended it. From that library carrel, surrounded by the ghosts of other people's research, I texted him. I knew it was weak, that I should have done it to his face, but I couldn't bear to see it. I couldn't bear to see the indifference, or worse, the relief. Me. We're done, Leah. Don't contact me. My thumb trembled so badly I had to type it twice. I hit send and shut my laptop. I didn't study. I just sat there until the librarian came by to tell me they were closing. His reply, 3 hours later, buzzed against the cheap wood of my nightstand. I'd been staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds, K1 letter. That's all I was worth. One tap of his thumb, while he was probably driving her home. The smell of stadium popcorn and her perfume still in his car. Now, the silence I had worked so hard to build, the fragile peace I'd constructed over the last 2 weeks, was full of his noise. The city bus sighed past my window, its headlights casting moving skeletal shadows across my wall. Leah. She meant nothing. You know that. Leah. I was just lost. I miss you. I miss us. My breath hitched. Us. There hadn't been an us for a long time. Leah. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about that night at the pier, my stomach clenched, hard and sharp. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was throwing out hooks, casting a line into the past, trying to see which memory still had the power to pull me in. The pier. Of course, the pier. My 17th birthday. It had been cold, a sharp wind coming off the water, but he'd brought a thermos of hot chocolate that tasted chalky and sweet. He'd wrapped his jacket around me, the one that always smelled like his specific detergent and something like cedar. We had shared fries out of a greasy paper cone, our fingers brushing, and he told me he'd never met anyone like me. This, right now, was the vulnerability I always wanted from him. This was the boy who would text me first, the one who would be afraid to lose me. I had dreamed of this Leah, the one who would fight for me, the one who wouldn't let me go with just a single letter. But he was only here because his other option fell through. He wasn't begging for me. He was begging for a safety net. He was begging for the girl he knew would absorb his indifference, the one who would wait by her phone for a read receipt, like it was a love letter. He had taught me what emotional abandonment felt like. He was the one who held my hand and let me drift away at the same time. My phone screen dimmed, the message fading. I felt a terrible aching sadness, not just for me but for him. He was vulnerable, yes, but he was still just as lost as he was when he left me standing alone in the crowd. Looking for his face, a new text flashed, bright and demanding. Leah, I'm outside. I sat bolt upright, my heart suddenly a cold stone in my chest. The blood drained from my face. I looked out my window, my curtains clutched in my hand, down 3 floors to the street. Under the sickly orange glow of the streetlight, his car was idling by the curb. The gray sedan with the one dim headlight. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was real. I left him once. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Now, he'd brought the fight to my doorstep, and the melancholy truth was, a part of me was just so tired of being strong. My thumb moved. It didn't go to block. It didn't go to reply. It just pressed the button on the side of the phone, turning the screen off, plunging the room, and me, back into the dark. But I could still hear it, even through the glass, a low, persistent rumble. The sound of his engine waiting. The dark was absolute for a second, but it wasn't quiet. The low, idling rumble of his engine was a promise. He wasn't leaving. I slid off my bed, my bare feet hitting the cold wooden floor. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't need to. I knew the geography of this room by heart. It was the one place that was entirely mine. I crept to the window and pulled the curtain back, just a fraction of an inch. Down on the street, the gray sedan was a dark shape under the light. I could see the silhouette of his head, unmoving, facing my building. He was just sitting there, waiting. My phone, dark on the nightstand, suddenly vibrated. Bzzz. A pause. Bzzzt. Another pause. Bzzzt. Bzzzt. It was a siege. He was on the street, and his messages were trying to break down the door to my mind. I wrapped my arms around myself, a cold draft slipping in through the window frame. I wouldn't look. I wouldn't. Reading them would be like letting him in. I started to pace, from the window to my desk, from my desk to the door, and back again. 4 steps one way, 4 steps back. The phone kept buzzing, the pattern changing. It was faster now. Psst. The apologies were over. This was the next stage. I knew his playbook. This was the frustration. The "how dare you ignore me." My eyes landed on the corkboard above my desk. Pinned next to a list of vocab words and a faded photo of my cat was a pair of tickets, red with gold lettering. City Film Festival, weekend pass. Dated 2 months ago. I stopped pacing. I remembered the rush of buying them, hitting confirm on the website so fast I mistyped my email. I'd presented them to Leah in the cafeteria, and he'd given me that wide, perfect smile. "Awesome, Elle," he'd said. "I can't wait." The night of the festival, I'd spent an hour getting ready. I'd worn my new boots and the silver necklace he'd given me for my half-birthday. I sat on my bed just like this, waiting for his text. On my way. It never came. At 7:30 p.m., half an hour after we were supposed to meet, my phone lit up. Stuck helping my dad with some things right. Rain check. I remembered the deflation, the way the air seemed to go out of my lungs. I texted back, "Oh, okay. Everything all right?" Read no reply. I went with my brother. He ate all my popcorn and complained about the subtitles. The next day, Monday, I was scrolling through Instagram before first period. And I saw it. Maya's story. A boomerang of her and 2 friends, holding up their own tickets, laughing in the lobby of the exact same theater I had been in. The timestamp was from Saturday night. I felt sick. My hands went cold. I scanned the background, my heart hammering, looking for Leah's unmistakable red hoodie. He wasn't in the shot. I confronted him by his locker. "Your dad feeling better?" "What?" "Oh yeah, fine. Just a long night," he'd said. Not meeting my eyes, spinning the combination on his lock. "Weird," I said, my voice sounding thin. Maya was at the film festival on Saturday. Too. He finally looked at me. His eyes went flat. "So? It's a big theater, Elle. I'm allowed to have a family thing, aren't I?" Stop being so jealous all the time. He'd made me feel crazy. He'd flipped it so fast that I was the one who ended up apologizing. "Sorry, I missed you." "I missed you too," he'd said, softening instantly, pulling me into a hug that smelled like he'd been outside. "Next weekend, I promise. Just us." But it wasn't just that. It was the parties where his hand would rest on Maya's back for a second too long. It was the way he'd laugh at her jokes, a deep, genuine laugh he didn't seem to have for me anymore. It was the constant, subtle betrayals, the 1,000 tiny ways he'd let me go, all while telling me I was the only one. He'd made me doubt my own eyes. I had betrayed myself over and over just to keep the peace. Bzzz, bzzz, bzzz. The phone vibrated so hard it skittered across the wood of the nightstand. I knew what those texts said without reading them. "Elara, stop this." "This is childish? Fine. Be like that." He was weaponizing my memories, but I had my own. He was using the pier, and I was holding on to the library, the tickets, the K. I would not go down to that car. I would not let him see my face. I would not betray myself again. I sat on the edge of my bed, my back to the window, and stared at the dark rectangle of my phone. The buzzing stopped. Silence. A deep, profound silence that felt heavier than the noise. Even the sound of his engine seemed to have cut out. My shoulders, which had been tensed up to my ears, finally dropped. I let out the breath I hadn't even realized I was holding. He was gone. He'd finally given up. A strange mix of relief and a sharp, familiar sting of disappointment washed over me. Ho! The sound wasn't just loud. It was violent. It blasted through the glass, through the walls, short-circuiting my brain. My heart didn't just jump. It felt like it had been punched, leaping into my throat. The car horn echoed down the empty city street, a furious, desperate demand that lit up every dog in a 3-block radius. My God, he was losing it. Honk! It wasn't just a tap. It was a full, lean-on-the-horn blast, a solid 15 seconds of noise. It echoed off the brick of my building and the one across the street, a sharp, metallic scream that seemed to hang in the air for seconds after it stopped. My ears rang. The dogs that had started barking were now howling, and then, the worst part. A light snapped on in the apartment below mine. 2B, Mr. Henderson, the super. A second later, his window slammed open, the old wood groaning in protest. "Hey!" a gravelly voice yelled into the street. "Shut that thing up! People are sleeping." I flinched back from my own window, my hand flying to my mouth. My face burned, a hot, prickling shame that was more intense than the sadness or the anger. This was me. This was my drama, bleeding out onto the street, staining the whole building. He wasn't just haunting me. He was making me the girl with the crazy ex who lays on his horn at 2 a.m. Down on the street, Leah's car door opened. I peeked again, hiding behind the edge of my curtain. He got out, just a silhouette in the orange light, and looked up. He couldn't see me, but his gaze was fixed right on my window. He raised his hands in a "what gives" gesture, as if he were the one being inconvenienced. He must have seen Mr. Henderson's light, because he got back in the car, a quick, jerky movement. The engine, which he must have cut when he honked, rumbled back to life. But he didn't drive away. He just sat there, the car idling, a stubborn, fuming presence. My phone, dark on the nightstand, suddenly lit up again. This time it wasn't a text. It wasn't a vibration. It was a call. The screen flashed with Leah. His old smiling photo from a better day. I jammed my thumb on the decline button. It immediately started ringing. Again, decline. It rang a third time. I hit decline so hard my nail clicked on the glass. A new text alert came through. I almost threw the phone, but the name on the screen wasn't Leah. It was Chloe. My breath caught. Chloe was my anchor. She was the one who had sat with me in that library carol, not saying a word, just handing me tissues and buying me a bitter coffee from the vending machine. Chloe. "You awake?" Chloe. Some lunatic just laid on his horn on my street, woke me up. Sounded like it came from your block. My fingers were shaking. Chloe lived 2 blocks over. He'd woken her up too. Me. It's him. He's outside. The reply was instant. The 3 dots didn't even have time to dance. Chloe. What? Chloe. Oh my God, Elle, is he still there? Me. Yes. He won't leave. A beat of silence, then my phone was ringing. Chloe's face, smiling in a goofy selfie from last summer, filled the screen. I pressed accept and brought the phone to my ear, my voice barely a whisper. "Ilara? Are you okay?" Her voice was sleepy but sharp, all the fuzziness gone. "I'm fine," I whispered, but my voice cracked. He's just sitting out there. Is he the one who honked? Yeah, my neighbor yelled at him. I felt a stupid, hysterical laugh bubble in my chest. Mr. Henderson from 2B. What a psycho, Chloe muttered. I heard ruffling, the click of a lamp. She was getting up. Okay, he's lost it. Like actually lost it. Maya breaking up with him must have snapped his last tiny little brain cell. I don't know what to do, I whispered. I sank down, my back against the wall, pulling my knees to my chest. He keeps texting. About the pier. Of course he is, she said, her voice laced with a familiar, protective anger. He's pulling the greatest hits album. Don't listen to it, Elle. It's all static. He doesn't want you. He wants the you that lets him get away with everything. He wants his spare tire back. Her words were like cold, clear water. They cut right through the fog of nostalgia and guilt. Spare tire. That's exactly what it felt like. A light in 4A just came on, I said, my voice dull, watching the building across the street. He's woken up the whole block. Okay, new plan, Chloe said, her voice firm. All business. You're not staying there. He's trapped you. You're coming here. What? No, Chloe, it's 2 a.m. and he's outside. I can't just walk past him. You're not going to. You're going to pack a bag. Right now, toothbrush, sweatpants, your phone charger. You're going to walk out your apartment door, go down the hall to the back stairs, the ones by the recycling chute. Got it? The back stairs. I never used them. They smelled like damp concrete and old garlic from the restaurant on the first floor. They led out into the alley behind the building. The alley? Yes, the alley. It lets out on Jefferson Street. He's parked on Elm. He won't see you. I'm on my way. No, Chloe, don't, I pleaded, a new wave of panic rising. It's late. It's dark. Don't come out for me. I'm already putting my shoes on, she said. I could hear the scrape of a chair. I'll meet you at the corner of Jefferson and 12th by the 24-hour bodega. I'll be in my car, the little blue one. I'll just be waiting, okay? 5 minutes. That's all you need. Chloe, 5 minutes, Alara. Get your stuff. He doesn't get to keep you prisoner in your own home. The line clicked dead. She was right. He didn't get to do this. He didn't get to abandon me for months, break my heart with a single letter, and then decide to chain me to my room with his car and his horn and his manufactured memories. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my hands were steady. I grabbed my backpack from the floor, the one I used for school. I unzipped it and dumped my history textbook and a folder of crumpled notes onto my bed. They landed with a heavy, final thud. I went to my dresser, pulling out a pair of gray sweatpants and a black hoodie. I grabbed my toothbrush from the bathroom cup and my phone charger from the wall. I shoved it all into the bag. I slipped my phone into my pocket. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door. My hands were on my sneakers, pulling the laces tight when my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text. I pulled it out, my stomach tightening. It was Leah, I'm so sorry about the horn. I needed you to know I was here, that I'm serious. Leah, please, Elle, just come to the window. Just let me see you. I won't leave until you do. I looked at the message. I won't leave until you do. It wasn't an apology. It was a threat. I turned the ringer off, silencing him for good, but I left the phone on. Chloe needed to be able to reach me. I crept back to the window. One last look. His car was still there, a dark predator under the orange light. He was waiting for me to appear in the window, to give him a sign, to acknowledge him. He wanted me to play my part in his drama, to be the girl in the window he was begging for. I let the curtain fall. I wasn't going to the window. I was going to the back door. I put my hand on the doorknob of my apartment. My keys clutched tight in my other hand, the metal biting into my palm. I turned the deadbolt. The snick of the metal sliding back sounded as loud as a gunshot in the tiny, silent apartment. I held my breath, cracked the door open, and slipped into the dim, carpeted hallway. The hallway carpet, a faded, ugly floral pattern, muffled my footsteps. Every sound in the building seemed magnified. The hum of the ancient refrigerator in 2A, the distant groan of the elevator shaft, the click, click, click of my own keys in my hand. I held my breath, expecting a door to open, expecting Mr. Henderson to stick his head out and ask what I was doing. Nothing. I reached the end of the hall. The steel door to the back stairwell was painted a sickly industrial green. The exit sign above it wasn't lit. I put my shoulder against the push bar. The door opened with a long, hydraulic shush and a heavy thud as it shut behind me. I was plunged into near-total darkness. And the smell hit me instantly, damp concrete, stale garlic from the restaurant's bins, and the sharp, sour tang of the recycling chute. It was cold, at least 10 degrees colder than the hallway. A single fly-specked bulb 3 floors down cast a weak yellow circle of light, leaving the landings in shadow. My footsteps echoed, a sharp slap, slap, slap on the concrete treads that sounded impossibly loud. I grabbed the gritty metal railing to steady myself, my heart hammering against my ribs in a way that had nothing to do with the stairs. This was insane. I was a fugitive in my own building. I kept moving, taking the stairs 2 at a time. I felt absurdly like he could hear me, like he could be out back too, waiting. My mind conjured him, his face in the shadows. Stop it. Chloe was waiting. Chloe, who had seen him flip from charming to cold in the space of a single cafeteria lunch. Chloe, who had never once said, "I told you so," even though she had. I reached the ground floor. The landing was littered with discarded pizza flyers. Another heavy steel door faced me, this one with a barred window. I put my hand on the push bar, hesitated, and then shoved it open. The door groaned, a long, rusty complaint, and I spilled out into the alley. The night air was sharp, smelling of wet pavement and the dumpsters lined up against the opposite wall. The alley was a canyon of brick, lit only by the bright artificial glow of Jefferson Street at the far end. He wasn't here. I was alone. I pulled the hood of my sweatshirt up, tucking my hair inside, and started walking. I didn't run. Running makes noise. Running attracts attention. I just walked fast, my backpack heavy, my keys clutched in my fist, the teeth facing out, just like my dad had taught me. Every shadow seemed to move. Every metallic clang from the restaurant kitchen made me jump. I kept my eyes fixed on the square of light at the end of the alley. I thought of him, out front, still staring at my dark window, waiting for me to appear, to validate his grand, romantic gesture. He was performing his regret, and he needed an audience. He needed me. The realization that I was refusing to be his audience made my spine straighten. I reached the end of the alley. The sidewalk on Jefferson was slick and empty. Across the street, the 24-hour bodega was an oasis of humming, fluorescent light. Its windows were covered in neon signs for energy drinks and cheap beer, and parked just past it, half in the light, half in the shadow, was a powder blue hatchback. Relief hit me so hard my knees went weak. I hurried across the street, my sneakers squeaking on the wet pavement. I didn't look back toward Elm Street. I didn't want to know if he was still there. I pulled on the passenger door handle. It was locked. A second later, I heard the click of the electronic lock, and I yanked it open, sliding inside. The car was warm. The heater was already blasting, and it smelled like Chloe's signature vanilla coconut air freshener. She didn't say anything. She just put the car in gear as I slammed the door shut, the solid thunk sealing out the night. She hit the lock button, and the snick of the locks engaging was the best sound I'd ever heard. "Seatbelt," she said. Her voice tight. I fumbled with the clip, my hands shaking so badly it took me 2 tries. Chloe pulled away from the curb, not fast, just smooth and steady. We turned right onto 12th, away from my building, away from him. I finally let my head fall back against the headrest. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding since 1:47 a.m. "He's insane," Chloe said, her eyes fixed on the road, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Actually, clinically, lock him up insane. Honking at 2 a.m.? He woke up the whole block," I whispered, watching the empty, wet streets slide by. The city felt like a movie set after the crew had gone home. "That's the point, Elle," she said, glancing at me. "He wants an audience. He wants to make it so big and so public that you have to respond, just to make it stop. It's emotional blackmail." With a car horn, she was right. It wasn't about love. It was about control. It was about making his pain so loud that it drowned out my right to be left alone. We drove the rest of the way to her house in silence, the only sound the thwip-thwip of the windshield wipers. Her street was dark, lined with sleeping suburban houses and neat trimmed lawns. It was the complete opposite of my block. It was quiet. It was safe. We tiptoed into her house, past the family photos in the hall, and down to her room in the basement. It was exactly as I'd left it, cozy, messy, and smelling like laundry. String lights were taped around her headboard, casting a soft, warm glow. I dropped my backpack on the floor and collapsed into the giant, worn-out beanbag chair in the corner. It exhaled around me. "You're safe here," Chloe said, closing the door softly. She went to her mini-fridge and tossed me a bottle of water. The plastic crinkled loudly in the quiet. "He won't come here. He doesn't even know you're here." "Thank you, Chloe," I said, my voice thick. I twisted the cap off the water but didn't drink. Seriously, I froze. He started texting about the pier, and for a second, "You remembered," she finished, sitting on the edge of her bed. I know. He knows how to do that. He knows which buttons to press. The pier? God, what a cliché. It worked, though, I admitted, the shame burning in my throat. For a second, I actually missed him. That's not him, Elle, she said, her voice firm but not unkind. That's a memory of one good night. You're forgetting the 100 other nights you sat in your room and cried because he left you on read to go play video games. Or to be with her. I nodded, staring at the water bottle. She was my mirror, the one who always reflected the truth I tried to blur. I know. I'm just so tired. I know. She scrubbed her hands through her messy sleep hair. Get some sleep. You can take the bed. I'll take the... Bzzzt. Chloe's phone, face down on her nightstand, vibrated against the wood. She sighed. Probably my mom, wondering what the hell I was doing with my car. She picked it up, her expression casual, and swiped it open. I watched her face. It didn't just fall. It collapsed. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her skin a pale, sallow color in the lamplight. Her eyes went wide and her mouth parted slightly. It wasn't confusion. It was fury. Ilara, she said. Her voice was dangerously quiet. What? What is it? My heart, which had just started to slow down, began to pound again. Is it your mom? Are we in trouble? Chloe didn't answer. She just slowly turned the phone screen toward me. It was a text message. From a number she didn't have saved, but I knew it as well as I knew my own. It was from Leah. I know she's with you. Tell her to stop hiding. I stared at the words on Chloe's screen. Tell her to stop hiding. The warmth from the heater, the cozy scent of vanilla, the safety of the basement, it all evaporated. I was cold again, a deep, invasive cold that started in my stomach. The string lights on the headboard suddenly looked flimsy, a childish defense against the dark. How? My voice was a croak. How did he get your number? Chloe's face was rigid with anger. He must have... I don't know, Elle. He must have taken it from your phone months ago. Back when you two were... She didn't have to finish. Back when I trusted him. Back when I left my phone unlocked on his passenger seat while I ran into a store. My carelessness, my trust, had just put my best friend in the line of fire. He's a stalker, Chloe said, her voice low and shaking with fury. This isn't just drama. This is stalking. I'm blocking him. No, don't, I said, grabbing her arm. Don't. It'll make him worse. He wants a reaction. He wants to know he got to us. He'll just honk again. Or come here. The thought hit me like a physical blow. Oh my God, Chloe, what if he comes here? He'll wake up your parents. He's not thinking straight. I have to go. I started to get up from the beanbag, my backpack sliding to the floor. You're not going anywhere, Chloe said, shoving me back down with a hand on my shoulder. It was surprisingly strong. You are not going back out there. You are not going back to him. I don't care if I have to call my dad. I don't care if I have to call the cops, Elle. This ends. The cops? My blood ran even colder. The cops, Leah, his parents. The whole thing would explode. It would be at school on Monday. It would be everywhere. No, Chloe, you can't. It'll ruin him. He's ruining you. She shot back, her whisper shout echoing in the small room. He's got you cowering in my basement at 3 a.m., afraid of a text message. Look at yourself. She was right. I was a mess. I was a disease. I had infected her house, her safe street, with his chaos. The guilt was suffocating. I'd done this. By ever trusting him, by ever loving him, I had done this. And then, in my lap, my own phone lit up. It was so bright in the dim room, it made me gasp. I'd silenced it, but I hadn't turned it off. Chloe and I both froze, our eyes locked on the screen. Another text from Leah. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely pick it up. Chloe watched me, her jaw tight, as I read it. Leah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I texted Chloe. I'm just losing it. Another apology. More static. I almost deleted it. But then the next message came through, before I could even move my thumb. Leah, I just keep thinking about that night at the 24-hour diner. After my grandma's funeral, I stopped breathing. It wasn't the pier. It wasn't a party. It wasn't a memory of us. It was a memory of him. It was almost a year ago. His grandma, the one who had practically raised him, had died. The funeral was on a Wednesday, and he'd been weird and silent for days. I'd given him his space, but that night, at almost midnight, he had called me. "Where are you?" I'd lied to my parents and snuck out. I met him at the Sun Up Diner, the greasy 24-hour place by the highway. He was sitting in a corner booth under a buzzing neon hot coffee sign. He hadn't been crying. He was just hollow. He was staring into a cup of black coffee he wasn't drinking. His parents, he'd said, were at home, receiving guests, and the house was so full of flowers and sad people he couldn't breathe. I didn't know what to do. I was 16. I didn't know anything about grief, so I just sat. I slid into the booth across from him. I ordered a vanilla milkshake, and I just sat there. I didn't say, "I'm sorry for your loss." I didn't say, "She's in a better place." I just sat with him. For 2 hours, in total silence, while he stared at his coffee and I sipped my milkshake. Finally, he'd looked up, his eyes bloodshot and clear. He'd reached across the table and just held my hand. His was freezing. "Thanks for coming, Elle," he'd whispered. The next message appeared on my screen. "Leah, you were the only one I wanted to see. You just sat there with me. You didn't try to make me talk. You just stayed. Leah, I'm that person again, Elle. I'm that hollow. Please. I just need to know you're not gone." This wasn't the manipulative boy from the pier. This wasn't the angry stranger laying on his horn. This was the boy from the diner, the lost, grieving, hollowed-out boy who had needed an anchor, and he was using that anchor to pull me back. My anger, my fear, the solid wall Chloe and I had built. It was all still there, but now there was a crack in it. A tiny hairline fracture and a deep, aching, unwanted wave of guilt was pouring in. He wasn't just a monster. He was a person I had once saved, and he was begging me to do it again. "Elle?" Chloe's voice was sharp, cutting through the memory. She'd seen my face change. She'd seen the shift. "Ilara, what is it? What did he say now?" I couldn't look at her. I just stared at the screen, at the words. "I'm that hollow." "Ilara, what did he say now?" Chloe's voice was a pinprick, trying to pop the bubble of the memory. But I was gone. I was back in that vinyl booth, the smell of stale coffee and industrial cleaner in my nose. I could feel the cold of Leah's hand, the grit of the sugar packet I'd been shredding on the table. He wasn't a monster. He was just broken. He was the boy who had looked at me with such raw, desperate gratitude it had made my chest ache. He was the boy I had been strong for. "Elle, give me the phone." Chloe's hand was in front of my face, fingers snapping. I didn't even realize I was crying. A single hot tear dripped off my chin and splashed onto the phone screen. "No," I whispered. It was a reflex. I was protecting him, protecting the memory. "Ilara, give it to me." She didn't ask this time. She snatched the phone from my hand. I let her. My own hands felt weak, useless. I watched her read the messages. Her face, which had been pale with anger, flushed a deep, blotchy red. She read, scrolled up, read again, and then she looked at me. It wasn't the look of concern I was used to. It was a look of pure, undiluted disbelief. "You're not falling for this," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a command. "Chloe, you don't understand." "Oh, I don't understand." She cut me off, her voice a low, furious hiss. She stood up from the bed and started pacing, her own phone forgotten. "I don't understand that he's using the one time he was ever truly vulnerable against you? That he's picked the one memory he knows you can't fight back against? He's not grieving, Ilara, he's cheating. This is emotional cheating. It's not like that," I stammered, wiping my face with the sleeve of my hoodie. He's in pain. He said he's hollow. I know what that looks like. I saw it. Yes, you did. A year ago." Chloe threw her hands up, turning to face me. "That's what makes this so disgusting. He's taking something real, something sacred to you, and he's using it as a tool. He's not that grieving boy anymore, Elle. He's the guy who lied to your face for 4 months. He's the guy who left you for Maya. He's the guy who was honking his horn an hour ago like a lunatic. The diner boy and the horn psycho are the same person. I flinched. Horn psycho, she was right. I knew she was right. My brain knew it. But my stomach, my heart, that deep, stupid, empathetic part of me that always wanted to fix things, was screaming. He had texted Chloe. He had laid on his horn. He had lied and lied. But I'm that hollow. What if she was wrong? What if he was both? What if he really was that broken? And the anger, the horn, the obsession with Maya was just a symptom of it? He needs help, I whispered, staring at my backpack on the floor. Then he can call a therapist. Chloe said, her voice cracking. He can call his mom. He can call his new best friend, Maya. It is not your job. You are not his emotional janitor, Elle. You are not his anchor. An anchor's job is to get dropped, and that's all he ever does to you. He holds on until the storm passes, and then he cuts the rope. Her words were so sharp, so true they hurt. Cuts the rope. He'd done it with a single letter. I was trapped. I was caught between the Leah who had abandoned me and the Leah who had needed me. And now he was telling me they were the same, that the boy who needed me was back. The silence in the room stretched. I could hear the hum of Chloe's mini-fridge. I was the one who had left. I had texted him, "We're done." Yes, he'd given me 1,000 reasons, but I was the one who pulled the plug. I was the one who had walked away. A new toxic guilt, colder and heavier than the fear, settled in my gut. He was right. I was hiding. I had run away from his texts, from his car, and now I was running away from his pain. I was abandoning him in his time of need, just like he had abandoned me, and that made me just as bad as him. Ilara. No. Chloe's voice was soft now. She'd seen the change in my face again. She knelt in front of the beanbag chair. Don't do this. Don't build a story where you're the bad guy. You did nothing wrong. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to be safe. I couldn't form the words. I just needed to know. I needed to know which Leah was real, the psycho or the boy in the booth. I couldn't live with the cognitive dissonance. I had to know. Ilara, what are you doing? Chloe asked, her eyes narrowing as I picked up my phone. My thumbs were moving before my brain had caught up. It was just to call his bluff. He was probably still outside my apartment, fuming, trying a new tactic. This would prove it. This would prove Chloe was right. My fingers typed the 2 words. The same words I had said to him a year ago when he'd called me, lost and hollow, from that diner. Where are you? I stared at the blue bubble. I hit send. Ilara, no! Chloe lunged for the phone, but it was too late. The message was gone. Delete it! Unsend it. It doesn't matter, I said, my voice feeling distant, thin. He's still outside my building. He's lying. This will prove it. We both stared at the screen. At the delivered receipt. 1 second, 2 seconds. The read receipt didn't even appear. The 3 dots didn't dance. A new message simply flashed onto the screen. It was instant. Sunup Diner. I've been here for an hour. Please. I stared at the words on the screen. Sunup Diner. My blood didn't run cold. It didn't pound in my ears. It just stopped. It felt like every drop in my body had turned to lead, sinking into my stomach. He wasn't at my apartment. He wasn't fuming in his car. He was there. He was at the one place that was more ours than the pier, more real than any party. He was at the place I had saved him. He wasn't lying. Oh my God, Chloe breathed, reading the text over my shoulder. Her voice was hollow with a new kind of panic. It's a trap, Elle. It's the biggest, most obvious trap he's ever set. He's not lying, I whispered. My own voice sounded strange to me, distant. Of course he's not lying about where he is, she said, grabbing my shoulders. That's what makes it a trap. He's not the horn psycho anymore. Now he's diner boy. He's performing the one role he knows you can't resist. He's baiting the hook with his own dead grandmother, Ilara. That is sick. She was right. My brain knew she was right, but the image was already branded in my mind. Leah, alone in that corner booth, under the buzzing neon, hollowed out. And I had abandoned him. I was the one who had left him on Reed. I was the one who was hiding at my friend's house. I had left him. And now he was in the one place he went when he was broken. I have to go, Chloe. I stood up from the beanbag chair. The movement felt slow, like I was wading through water. No, you don't, she said, her voice dropping, pleading. You want to. It's not the same thing. You don't owe him this. You don't owe him anything. I grabbed my backpack from the floor and slung it over one shoulder. I owe it to me. I have to. I have to know. I can't live with this. With him being that broken and me hiding. He's not broken. He's a liar. Chloe was almost crying now, her face crumpled in desperation and fury. He's the guy who texted my phone, Elle. The guy who stalked you to my house. That is who you're going to meet? In the middle of the night? At a highway diner? Alone? The word alone finally cut through the fog. She was right. That was stupid. I wasn't stupid. I won't be alone, I said, zipping my hoodie. Chloe's eyes widened. What? You're coming with me. The fight went out of her, replaced by a cold, sharp, exhausted anger. She stared at me for a long second, and I saw something in her face I'd never seen before. Disappointment. It was 1,000 times worse than her yelling. Fine, she said, her voice flat, dead. Fine. If you are this determined to walk back into the fire, I'll hold the damn extinguisher. But I'm driving. We park where I can see the door. And the second he raises his voice, or looks at you wrong, or even breathes too hard, I'm not calling my dad. I'm calling 911. Deal? Deal. The word was sandpaper in my throat. I was dragging her into this again. The collateral damage just kept spreading. Get your shoes, she said, snatching her keys from her desk. God, I can't believe I'm doing this. We crept back up the basement stairs and out the front door. The blue hatchback was cold again, the vanilla coconut smell soured by the tension. I clicked my seatbelt into place, the sound echoing the click of the deadbolt I'd turned just hours before. It felt like a lifetime ago. Chloe pulled out of her driveway, her movements jerky and angry. The silence in the car was absolute, heavier than any noise Leah's horn could have made. It was the sound of a friendship stretching to its breaking point. I watched the dark, sleeping houses of her neighborhood give way to the empty, wet streets of the city. We were the only car moving. It felt like the end of the world. You know he won, right? Chloe said, her voice flat, her eyes fixed on the road. I didn't answer. He didn't get you at the apartment. He didn't get you with the horn. He didn't even get you by texting me. So he pulled the one card he had left, the Grandma Diner card, and it worked. She glanced at me, her face a pale mask in the dashboard lights. He's reeled you all the way in, Elle. I turned to look at my own reflection in the side window. A pale, tired-looking girl with shadows under her eyes. She was right. I was a fish on a hook, swimming dutifully back to the boat, dragging my best friend with me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I knew who it was. I didn't have to look. Leah, are you coming? I didn't reply. I just watched the highway access signs go by, and then I saw it. The huge, buzzing, yellow and red sign, shaped like a coffee cup. Half the neon was burned out, so it just said, Sunup DIER. A beacon of bad coffee and worse decisions. The parking lot was almost empty. A few long-haul trucks were parked in the dark back section. A single tow truck was near the door, and a gray sedan, parked right in front, under a sputtering light. The one dim headlight was off, but I'd know that dent on the passenger side bumper anywhere. Chloe didn't pull in. She drove right past the entrance and parked across the street, in the dark, gravel lot of a closed-down tire shop. She kept the engine running, the headlights off. Okay, she said, putting the car in park. There he is. We could see right through the diner's big plate glass windows. The inside was aggressively bright, a sterile white and chrome box, and he was in the corner booth. Our booth, my heart didn't lurch. It just seized, Chloe was wrong. He wasn't the horn psycho, but he wasn't just the diner boy either. He looked worse. He was wearing his black hoodie, the hood down, and he was just staring into a white coffee mug. His face was pale, his hair a mess. He looked small. He looked exactly like he'd said, hollow. He looks awful, I whispered. He's supposed to look awful, Elle, Chloe said, her voice a low, hard hiss. It's a costume. He's wearing grief. He probably hasn't slept, but that's his own fault. My phone buzzed again. Leah. I can see a car. Is that you? I watched him. He looked up from his cup, his eyes scanning the darkness across the street, right toward us. He couldn't see us, not really, but he was looking right at us. I have to go, I said. Elle, wait. Just stay here. Keep the engine running. Keep your phone in your hand. I unbuckled my seatbelt. Ilara, if he even looks at you. I know. I grabbed the door handle. I'll be okay. I have to see. I opened the door, and the cold 4 a.m. air hit my face. The gravel crunched under my sneakers. I pulled my hood up, a useless gesture, and started walking across the empty 4-lane road toward the buzzing, broken sign. I could feel Chloe's eyes on my back, a physical, burning weight. I was halfway across the road when he saw me. His head snapped up, his whole body tensed. He didn't look happy. He didn't look relieved. He just looked haunted. He watched me, unmoving. I reached the glass door. I pulled the handle. A small, cheerful bell tinkled above my head. A stupid, jarring sound in the dead of night. The diner smelled exactly as I remembered. Old grease, burnt coffee, and the sharp chemical smell of industrial cleaner. A single waitress with tired eyes glanced up at me from the counter, then went back to scrolling on her phone. I walked toward the back, my footsteps silent on the linoleum. Leah didn't stand up. He just watched me come closer. I stopped at the edge of the booth. The red vinyl was cracked in the same places. His coffee mug was full, untouched. His eyes were bloodshot and raw, but they were dry. He wasn't crying. I stood there, my backpack still on, my keys clutched in my pocket. I couldn't breathe. I was here. I had done it. He looked up at me, his face a wreck of exhaustion and something I couldn't name. His voice was a rasp, the first time I'd heard it spoken aloud in weeks. You came, he whispered. The little bell on the diner door had tinkled, and now the silence it left behind felt huge. The waitress didn't look up. The only sound was the low, electric buzz of the neon sign outside. I stood at the edge of the booth, my backpack a heavy, solid weight on my shoulder. I didn't sit down. I didn't slide in. I stayed on my feet, a visitor. You came, he whispered again, as if he couldn't believe it. He looked exactly like the memory, but I was different. I wasn't the 16-year-old girl who just wanted to fix him. I was the 17-year-old girl who had been broken by him. You shouldn't have been there, Leah, I said. My voice was as dry and raspy as his. You shouldn't have been at my apartment. His face crumpled. It wasn't a performance. It was real. I know, I just... Elle, I lost it. When you left? When you sent that text, He shook his head, looking down into his untouched coffee. I thought I was fine. I thought... Okay, she needs space. And I had Maya. It was new. It was easy. She just laughed all the time, you know? She didn't know you, I said. No? He looked up, his eyes desperate. She didn't know me. And when it wasn't fun anymore, she said I was too moody. She said I was always looking at my phone, that I was obsessed. He laughed, a short, bitter sound that was more like a cough. She broke up with me because I couldn't stop thinking about you. Because I kept waiting for you to, I don't know, to text me, to get mad, to do something. He finally admitted it. He'd been waiting for me to fight for him, all while he was with her. I'm a mess, Elle. I'm nothing. I'm that person again. The one from the funeral. I'm just hollow. I'm so sorry. This was it. The full, messy, self-hating confession. The complete surrender. This was the vulnerability I had craved for months, and I felt nothing. Just a deep, profound exhaustion. He reached across the table, just like he had a year ago. His hand was cold and pale under the fluorescent lights. It lay on the sticky formica, palm up. An offering. A beg. Please, Elle, he whispered. I'm nothing without you. You're the only one who... You just stay. Please, just stay. We can fix this. I'll be better. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. Anything, just don't leave me. Not again. His vulnerability was total. It was the diner boy in full force, begging for his anchor. I looked at his hand. I saw the hand that had held mine in this exact booth, a gesture so full of silent, desperate need it had bound me to him. I also saw the hand that had gripped a steering wheel, with Maya laughing beside him, the hand that had typed K, the hand that had held his phone, texting my friend, tell her to stop hiding, the hand that had slammed on a car horn, terrorizing my street, holding me captive. They were all the same hand. I looked up from his hand to his face. He was hollow. Chloe was wrong about that. He was an empty room, waiting for someone to come in and furnish it. He had no center of his own. First it was me. I was his anchor. Then he'd tried to make it Maya. When that dock proved unsafe, he'd come back for me, the anchor he'd just dropped in the middle of the ocean. He was right. I did stay. I slowly, deliberately, pulled my own hands back from the edge of the table. I clasped them in front of me. I didn't take his. You're right, Leah, I said, and my voice was finally steady. It was the steadiest thing in the whole diner. I do stay, I did. I sat right here for 2 hours while you grieved. I stayed home while you went to the film festival with her. I stayed in my apartment while you texted me about the pier. I stayed in my room while you laid on your horn. I've been staying and staying and staying. His face, which had been set in lines of practiced misery, flickered with confusion. So stay now, he pleaded. Help me. No, the word was quiet. But it was absolute. It was a locked door. It was a deadbolt sliding into place. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I can't, I said. That's what I finally get. You are hollow, Leah, and you're just trying to fill that hole with me. But I'm not a replacement for a personality. I'm not an anchor. I looked him right in the eye. I'm a person, and you're just a rope. You keep cutting me loose when you find a new dock, and then you beg for me back when the storm hits. I'm done being dropped. I slid my backpack strap further up my shoulder. I'm not your janitor, Leah. I'm not your anchor, and I'm not your spare tire. I turned. I left you once, I said, my back to him, and I'm leaving you again. Goodbye. I walked away. I didn't run, I walked. I heard him scrape out of the booth. Lara, wait, please! The little bell on the door tinkled, cutting him off. The 4 a.m. air was cold and sharp, and it had never tasted so good. It felt like the first clean breath I'd taken in a year. I walked across the 4-lane road, my sneakers steady on the asphalt. I didn't look back. I could feel his eyes on me, but I didn't look. The gravel of the tire lot crunched under my feet. I pulled open the passenger door of the little blue car. The click of the lock was the sound of a key turning. I slid in. Chloe was staring at me, her eyes wide and red-rimmed, her phone clutched in her hand, 911 ready to dial. She looked from my face to the diner door and back again. She didn't have to ask. I clicked my seatbelt. Go, I said, my voice just a whisper. Just go. She didn't hesitate. She threw the car into drive and hit the gas. The tires spun on the gravel, and then we were on the road. Pulling away, I did, finally, look in the side view mirror. He was standing outside the diner, a small, stunned silhouette under the buzzing, broken DIER sign. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't running. He was just standing there, watching us go. I watched him until we turned the corner, until he was just a speck, until he was gone. Then I turned my head. I faced forward. The night wasn't black anymore. The horizon, over the tops of the sleeping buildings, was a pale, bruised, broken purple. The first hint of morning. I was so tired my bones ached. But I wasn't hollow. I wasn't an anchor. I was free.